Thank you for joining me for Tending the Soul. My name is Pastor Jamie Willis. I am an associate pastor at First United Methodist Church in Claremore, Oklahoma, and I'm a student at Asbury Theological Seminary. And in the past couple months, I've really noticed in my own life, I have to be really intentional about tending to my soul during the week. And I'm sure you can agree with that. You know, we get out there and we go to work and we deal with people, and we are surrounded by situations and circumstances that can sometimes, pull the life out of us, and we can get in a rut with our soul, or our soul can get out of whack even, and we have to tend to our soul. And so I'm so thankful that you're joining me, and I hope that you experience a soul tending as you listen today. So I wanted to just share with you real quick something I discovered that was kind of neat this past week about Leonard Nemoy. Now, Leonard Nimoy is a very popular and iconic figure in the culture. He played Spock in Star Trek, and he made something very iconic. It's a symbol and a saying, and I'm sure you all know it. It's this, the Vulcan symbol, and he would say, "Live long and prosper." Well, what if I told you that came from an Old Testament blessing from the scriptures? So one of the most popular Old Testament blessings comes from the book of Numbers chapter 6. And it is, "May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace." And it was Aaron and his sons, the priests, who were told to bless the people with that particular blessing. And what would happen in the Old Testament is that people would bring the priests their sacrifice, and the priest then would take the sacrifice into the Holy of Holies, sacrifice their lamb or whatever it is on their behalf, and then come back out and bless them. Now let's get back to Leonard Nemoy. So real quick, another thing in the Jewish culture is that they won't say the name of God for fear of it being so powerful that they would disintegrate or die. So they won't say Yahweh, Shaddai, and things like that. And so they won't use God's name. They'll say Lord, which is what it was substituted in the Old Testament with, was Lord. Now, Leonard Nemoy is the son of Ukrainian immigrants, and he grew up Jewish and would go to the synagogue in Boston. And as a little kid, he would go to services, and when the services were done, the rabbis, during the benediction, would have everyone shut their eyes or cover their eyes, and then they would bless the congregation. And the reason for the covering of the eyes is because the blessing would include this calling in the presence of God, and it would be so powerful that if anybody saw it, that they would die. Well, the story has it, in an interview with Leonard Nemoy, when he was about 12 years old, I think, he decided that he was so curious, he wanted to see what was actually happening, to see, what would happen if he opened up his eyes and looked during that blessing. And while everybody else's eyes were closed, the priests, underneath their prayer shawl, the rabbis, had their hands extended, and they were blessing the congregation, and they wouldn't use the name of the Lord, but they used this symbol. This is so interesting. So outstretched hands underneath their prayer shawl, this is the way their hands looked, holding them towards the congregation, and Leonard Nemoy saw this. Now this, friends, is the form of the Jewish or the Hebrew letter Shin, and it's the first letter in the name Shaddai. It's the first letter in the word Shalom. It's the first letter in the word Shekinah, which is the glory of God, the Shekinah glory. And so instead of saying God's name, they would do this and symbolize God's name and God's presence as a blessing. Now, there was an episode in Star Trek where Leonard Nimoy, Spock, had to go back to his planet Vulcan, and he'd never been there before. He didn't grow up there. He's never met another Vulcan in his life, and he was talking with the producers, and they were trying to come up with this way of two Vulcans that could greet each other. How would they greet each other? And Leonard Nimoy remembered from his childhood this, and he said, "What if we did this?" And the producers agreed, and so it became "Live Long and Prosper." Live Long and Prosper was Leonard Nimoy's way of blessing people. And people have been blessing each other without even knowing it ever since, because this has been something that's been part of our culture for years and years. And when we start thinking of blessings, we're told that we're a blessing so that we can bless others. And there's all kinds of principles for stewardship. A steward is someone who manages what God owns. God is the owner of everything, and we are simply stewards of our time. God's gifted us with time. He's entrusted us with certain things, and we're stewards of it all. And we're blessed so that we can bless others. And so there's principles that guide this idea of stewardship. There's the tithing principle, which is giving 10% of your income to the ministries of the church so God's presence can go out into the community and into the world. There is something called the river principle, where that means we're not a collection point of our stuff. Our stuff is used as an outflow. It comes to us and then it flows out to others. There's a manager's principle, again, which just means that we're managers of what God gives us. There's the investment principle, meaning that your heart will go wherever your investments are. If you've been involved in the stock market or cryptocurrency, as soon as you put money in there, you're watching it constantly because your heart goes where your money goes. And so, it's good to invest in the things of God. But one of my favorite kind of stewardship principles is this seed time and harvest principle. You sow and you reap. You sow and you reap. And we're constantly sowing seed all the time. And God tells us in Genesis that even until the earth ends, there will always be seed time and harvest. And there's this parable that Jesus tells about sowing seed and how, the farmer will throw seed out and some will fall on rocky soil and some will fall on shallow soil. Some will get choked out by the weeds. And then some will fall on good soil. And in that good soil, that seed will reap a harvest of 30, 60, even 100-fold. And so it's not our job necessarily to wonder about where the seed falls. We're just supposed to, we're supposed to throw seed everywhere. It's this idea of seed time and then harvest is coming, friends. And seed time and harvest is a biblical principle that's been kind of active since the book of Genesis, since the very beginning, all the way up until now. And there's a quote I want you guys to know. I heard somebody say one time that you won't necessarily have a harvest just because you plant. And you guys are familiar with that. I'm sure you know that. Just because you plant a seed of faith doesn't mean that that seed is going to take root in somebody, right? Just because you plant doesn't mean that you're going to get a harvest. But you'll never get a harvest if you don't plant something. So friends, I just want to encourage you during this tending of the soul to make sure that you're planting seed, and never forget that God was always and has always been the very first giver. God gave himself in the Son, Jesus Christ, on behalf of all humanity to redeem and to restore us. And so now we are stewards of all that God has blessed us with. Well, God bless you, friends. I thank you again for joining me for Tending the Soul. I hope to see you soon.